So today I want to discuss with you about the consumer theory or consumer behavior. Why it is important to understand the consumer behavior? Because when you, as a business manager, uh, selling goods or services, so you understand how your consumer is going to behave when the prices change or when the overall income level in the society or the economy change, then how the consumer is going to behave regarding your product or services. So let's start this idea of consumer behavior. So let's share with you the screen. So consumer behavior is our topics, and we go first, we're going to discuss what is utility. So utility is a word we use in economics. We use this word as well in our daily conversation. Utility, benefit, happiness, pleasure, what the satisfaction you drive by consuming some goods or services, that is what we say utility. So utility is the satisfaction a consumer receives from consuming goods or services. So when you take a joyride on any of the rides in amusement park, so what the benefit, what the happiness you get it by spending the ticket on that. So that's the what we are called as a utility. What's the utility? So you eat a donut, the satisfaction you get it after eating that donut is the utility of that donut. So any product, any services you get, whatever the satisfaction you get from that is your utility from that product or service. So how, if you are consuming or using the product more than one, so then the total utility is going to give us the idea of the utility you derived by the consumption of all the units you are consuming. If you take 2 rides or 3 rides, then the total utility is all the rides utilities. When we add up, that is going to be a total utility. If you are eating 3 donuts, so all the utility you are getting from these 3 donuts, that is going to be a total utility from your donuts. So total satisfaction resulting from the consumption of a given product. Now, related to that total utility, there is a concept of a marginal. Now, definitely, if you are taking 2 or 3 products, then the marginal utility of each product is different. Like when you are very thirsty, you take a first glass of water to drink, then it gives you a quite large amount of satisfaction as compared to if you immediately take the second glass. So the utilities are different from these 2 glasses, even though the water is same, the glass is same, the time is same, everything is same, but the satisfaction you are getting is different. And that's what we call it as a marginal utility of the first glass and the marginal utility of the second glass. So every product, every unit of a product has a different utility. When you start eating the first few bites, you get more satisfaction, more pleasure, more enjoy, as compared to the bites you are taking at the very end of your meal. So that's again, the marginal utilities of each bite is different. So marginal utility is a concept that we get additional satisfaction by consuming one more additional unit of product, that's called marginal utility. Now, why it is important to understand? Because the consumer behavior is changing with the change in the marginal utility, with the change in the total utility. And we use these 2 concepts to explain the things. So when I just gave you an example, like when you drink water, so the first glass of water gives you a much more satisfaction as compared to the second. And if you take the third one, so the third one is going to give the less satisfaction as compared to the second, and second is getting less as compared to the first one. So what this behavior is reflecting? This behavior is reflecting that the marginal utility is diminishing. Like as you are consuming more and more of a good, then the utility, the marginal utility from the additional unit is decreasing. So the utility has and consumer derives from successive units, one after the other, of a particular product consumed over time, same period of time. That's important, same period of time. If you take the water some other time when you were thirsty again, then in this case, the utilities cannot be different, maybe more or maybe less, but we cannot sure. But if you are taking at the same period of time, diminishes as the total consumption of the product increases. So that's important thing to remember, that consecutive or successive units and at the same period of time, then the utility is going to be diminished. Margin utility is going to be diminished. Although the total utility is going to increase, but the margin utility is going to decrease. Like, for example, if you drink a first glass of water, you get, assuming that you get 100 utils of utility from the first glass, and the second glass you get it 80, and the third glass you get it 60. So the total utility is increasing from 100 to 180 and then 240. So but the margin utility is decreasing from 100 to 80 to 60. So at the same time, the total utility is increasing, but the margin utility is decreasing. And we also call this a concept as the total utility is decreasing, but with a increasing, but with a decreasing rate. So the rate of increase in the total utility is decreasing. Initially, the utility you receive is high. As you more and more water, your margin utility from additional liters decreases. So here's an example, Mr. Alisson is drinking juice and juice per day, bottles of juice per day. So the first column is explaining the number of juice bottles Alisson is drinking or taking. So he drinks 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the total utility we calculate, or she explains that this is the total utility she's getting. Like from the first, when it is 0, definitely the utility is 0. But when the first she got 30, and then total utility is getting 50, and then 65. So we see here that it's going to increase gradually over as the number of bottles of juice are increasing. But if we look at the margin utility, we see that the margin utility from the first bottle of juice is 30 and then 20. And so we observe a same pattern, which we call it as a diminishing or decreasing. How do we calculate this? So very simple, like we see here that the change in total utility, because the total utility is changing because of a change in the number of bottles of juice Alisson is consuming. So from 0 to 1, so the utility is changing from 0 to 30. So it means the first bottle is going to give us the margin utility of 30. The second bottle, the total utility increased from 30 to 50. So how much is the change? 20. And how much is the bottles changing? 1. So that's going to be 20 for the second bottle, and so on. We find it. When we plot this against the number of bottles of juices on x-axis and utility, total utility on y-axis, so we get a curve, like a curve with increasing but with a decreasing rate. And we see here that it reach up to the maximum, and after that, if we force her to take more juices, so that utility is going to be negative as well. That is possible, that the utility can be negative, or maybe she's going to sick or something. And we also see here that the margin utility is decreasing. From the very first bottle of juice, it's 30, but gradually over time, over the consumption of more bottles of juices, it's decreasing. And if we further use, it's going to be negative as well, so going below the 0. So by this way, we learn that the total utility and marginal utility, how it's behaved. Now, consumer seeks to maximize. Now, this is the second, we first build up this idea of a utility, total utility, and margin utility. Now, why we are doing this? Because as a consumer, our objectives when we are consuming any product or any service is to get the maximum benefit. You go to the doctor, you ask as much possible as the questions regarding your issue of health, so that you can get the maximum benefit. You go to the dentist, you explain everything, and you want to know everything and the problem you are facing. So you go to the lawyer, so you want to explain your issue and you want to get as much as information you can possible. So that's a behavior every consumer, you, me, and everyone is trying to get the maximum benefit from the consumer. So this is what we call it as a consumers maximizing decision. So consumers always seek, and this behavior also we see that when we go to the market and when we see that the products, those who are cheaper or discounted at the discounted price, so we buy those products. The reason is that we want to maximize it. So consumers seek to maximize their total utility subject to the constraints. What is a constraint? What is a limitation? The limitation is always our budget, like how much money we have. So and secondly, the price of the product. So that's the limitation we are facing, and we call it as a budget constraint based on the your resources, your income, your money available to buy those products, as well as the price of those products. So utility maximizing, and every one of us, because we will talk it that we all are assuming that we are behaving rationally. So rational behavior is that we want to use our resources, our income, our money in such a way that we can maximize the utility of that money. We don't want to waste our money. So that's the way that utility maximizing consumer allocate expenditure so that the marginal utility obtained from the last dollar spent on each product is equal. So this is the theory. This is what we call it as a utility maximizing theory, like in which the economist calculate a ratio that, and we all doing that unintentionally, that we want to spend on each item in our budget or in our purchase or in a cart in such a quantity that the last dollar what we are spending on that product, the marginal utility divided by the price of the product should be equal to all other products what we are buying or services we are buying, to their marginal utility divided by the price of their product of those products or of those services. So by this way we are equating, and believe me, we all are doing unintentionally this exercise, but we don't know exactly that when you go to buy potatoes or tomatoes, so how you decide that you want a 1 pound or a 2 pound or a 3 pound. It's all based on our utility, that how much utility you're going to get, because you don't want to waste money. And this exercise is unintentionally we are doing. We are not using calculator or some devices to calculate this, but unintentionally we are doing this. So we see here that Ellison, whose utility from the last dollar spent on juice is more than from the last dollar spent on burritos. So let's assume that Ellison is using their whole money, whatever available between the two products. One is juice and the other one is burritos. So she's going to spend on the juice until where the marginal utility from the last bottle of juice divided by the price of juice should be equal to the last bag of burritos she is buying divided by the price of that. So equate it. In that case, that combination of drinks and burritos is going to give her the maximum benefit, maximum satisfaction. So she increased her total utility by spending $1 more on juice and less on burritos. She maximized total utility when the margin utility per dollar spent on juice equals, this is what I just explained, equals margin utility per dollar spent on burritos. So we call it as when we divide the margin utility of the last juice bottle divided by the price of, we call it as a margin utility per dollar on juice and marginal utility per dollar on burritos. So these should be equal. So that's a way. And mathematically, we can write it. What I am saying, mathematically, we can write this in a way like margin utility of X divided by the price, which can be a juice, which can be a burritos, whatever it is. So this should be equal to the margin utility of Y, which is another product, divided by the price of it. So we equate, and that equation can be long as how many products or services you are buying. If you want to utilize your money maximum or getting a maximum benefit or maximum utility from them. Now, we can substitute or the places of these ways, and we see here that marginal utility of X over marginal utility of Y is equal to Px over Py. Px over Py is a relative price of these two products. And this is the slope of the budget line as well. So where the utility is maximizing, where the relative price is equal to the marginal utility of X over marginal utility of Y. So what we are discussing here is that this approach of utility maximization is a rational approach. And we are assuming that everyone in the society is behaving rationally. But we see in the society that people are behaving irrationally. So evidence, however, suggests that consumer may deviate from rational. And that deviation can be of many reasons, like some want to do it by themselves, some are doing it by looking the situation differently, or the available choices are framed very differently. And sometimes the policies and the peers and all these nudging them to do this. So by this way, we see that it is not necessarily that the consumer is following this as a very strict or always rationally. Sometimes they behave irrationally, like a person who is driving a car with overspeeding. So it's not a rational behavior, because by this way, he is taking a risk as well as putting the risk, the lives of the others at risk. So this is the way that it should not, we are assuming that the consumer is rational. Now, if the situation is like this, like we see here, what happens when there is a change in the product price? Like if the product price change, or definitely prices are changing in the world. So then definitely this ratio is disturbed. And by this disturbance of this ratio, the consumer is going to change the quantities or the utility. And by this way, we see that they are trying to again establish a new equation, a new balance by changing the quantities, by changing the number of goods they are buying of one product as compared to the other. So for example, here, if the price of juice X rises in this particular case of Alison, then at the previous utility maximization point, that is no more valid, because now the relative price is greater than the marginal utility X over marginal utility Y. To restore the equality, the consumer reduced the consumption of juice. Why? Because, you know, when the price of juice rises, so it means when we divide this with the marginal utility previously was using, so we are getting a lesser value, right? We are getting a lesser value. This side is smaller. So how we can increase the so if we consume one less bottle of juice, the marginal utility, because we remember the marginal utility is decreasing. So if we buy one less bottle, so the marginal utility of the second last bottle is higher as compared to the last bottle. So we go to the second last. So by this way, the marginal utility of X is going to increase, and by this way, they're going to create a balance. So the hypothesis of diminishing marginal utility tells us that as a consumer buys less of a product, the marginal utility rises. So this leads to a basic prediction of a demand theory. As a rise in the price of a product leads each utility maximizing consumer to reduce the quantity demanded. So we can prove from here that how the law of demand works, because the marginal utility is going to be the balance between the marginal utility per dollar of that product whose price is rising is going to be disturbed. So in order to restore that, what we have to do, we start consuming or buying less of that. So if we look at, again, the demand curves, so these are downward sloping demand curves of two different buyers or two different persons, and how we can get it for the demand for a market. It's Arun and Bashira, and then this is the demand curve for a whole market by horizontally summing up the demand curve. And we see here that if the price is 6, no demand, and if the price is 6 for Arun, there's no demand. For Bashira, there's a demand for 1.5 units. So for the total market as well, it's a 1.5 units. But at the price of 3, Arun demands 2 and Bashira demands 4. So altogether, at the price of 3, the quantity demanded is 6. So we see it's a horizontal summing up of the demand for the market. So the rest of the things we're going to discuss in part 2 and part 3. I hope you enjoy it, and please do subscribe my channel so that you can get more videos when I upload.